So I was recently part of reviewing some good material about from thank you about Dostoevsky's story in one of his novels. There's in the Brothers Karamazov, the grand novel, and which was his last work, and it was published in 1880. There's a little story within the larger narrative, within the larger grand narrative, where one of the characters discusses a story he's thinking about, and it's a story of Jesus returning to the age of Inquisition in Spain, when the church was killing heretics, mostly Muslims. And of course, sometimes, like having my mother's side is Circassian, I cannot help but think perhaps it wasn't a coincidence that Dostoevsky wrote about the killing of Muslims in this brutal manner, when also the Russian Royal Army had just committed a massacre against the Circassian Muslim population in the Caucasus between 1860 something until the end of like 1870s. And so he basically was writing this novel in the wake of that horrific massacre. And it's considered one of the largest massacres of the 19th century because it decimated more than 95% of the Circassian population in the Caucasus, to like basically due to brutal killings, a genocide, mass starvation, and forced exile, and which is why my ancestors traveled to the Ottoman Empire. And we are told that my grandfather's father was born on the way, or my grandfather himself. We hear that he was born on the way, and the Circassian community didn't discuss this massacre much. But when I was rereading Dostoevsky, I went into it and I realized how horrific it had been and how they were a dignified people, the Circassians, and they really moved on and integrated again. Because, during the Mamalik too, they also were the Muslim actually period that repelled the Mongol and the Mongol invasion and also the Crusaders. So they have been part and parcel of the evolution of the Muslim world. But what drew my attention this time, like in the Grand Inquisitor actually challenges Jesus and says, "Why have you come back?" He said, "You refused the three temptations." Yeah, the three temptations of Satan. He said that, and we have accepted them. Meaning the church, the authorities of church and state have accepted the temptations. And what were these temptations? Basically, Christ, when he went into the desert and fasted for 40 days, the devil came to him and he said, if you give up this, I shall give you, like, basically giving him temptations. He said, like, if your Lord loves you this much and you've been fasting, ask the stone to turn into bread. And Christ refuses. And he says, man does not live by bread alone, but lives by every word that comes out of the Lord's mouth. And in Arabic, we say insan, laysa bil khubzi wahdahu yahya al insan, which is a gender neutral term, that a human being does not live by bread alone. And then he actually asked him to throw him, the second temptation, he asked him to perform a miracle, that to throw himself from the roof of the temple so that the angels will catch Jesus. And he says, I shall not tempt the Lord my God. And at the very end, he offers him that if he gives away his spiritual power, the kingdoms of the earth until the end of time, basically political authority and control power. And Jesus every single time chooses God over all these temptations. So these are the last temptations of Christ, as they're usually stated in Christianity. But I say they are the first foundations of Islam, because the same thing, that the Quran, like as we know, records all these contentions against the Prophet Muhammad, how they said all the prophets came with miracles, and yet you don't have a miracle with you. And the Quran says this book, this linguistic being, is the miracle itself. This linguistic event that can shift your worldview is the miracle itself. That what you think as ordinary is the extraordinary. That this life itself, the fact that it is created, is extraordinary. That you're alive is extraordinary. So Islam rejects the miraculous and the occult. Islam also holds on to fasting as a way of affirming the superiority or the ascendancy of God's spirit within us over the need for material subsistence. And therefore, like, it's as if we've taken the torch, Jesus gives us the torch, and we're like saying to Satan, we don't live by bread alone, which is a political weapon when you think about it, that is waved in front of societies that you'll starve. And we're seeing now in Gaza too, or in other contexts in which survival is waved against people to subjugate them and to subdue them. And the last one is political power. And we all know that when the Prophet was given to become the ruler of Arabia, to stop his call for Islam, he said, لو وضعوا الشمس في يميني والقمر في يساري ما تركت هذا الأمر. That if they put the moon in my right hand and the sun in my left hand, I shall not stop this call. And we all know that Jesus actually did perform miracles and multiplied loaves of bread that could feed like tons of, like, multitudes of people. And we know that he cured the sick, resurrected the dead. But the moment when this is placed above God, this attachment to worldly phenomena, that the prophets always choose God and the spirit within us. And so and the prophet also became a ruler of Medina. So it's a relationship to all these things rather than rejecting of bread or political authority. But do you place bread or political authority above God? That is where Islam also fine-tunes these relationships with body, with spirit, with political authority, that you can be in power, but as long as you don't worship power. And that's why, like, actually the temptation story in heaven is not, Satan does not tempt Adam and Eve in the Quranic version of the creation story with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Satan tempts them with the tree of immortality and invincible power, the hunger for immortality and the hunger for unfading power. And that is like, and they ate from this tree. So when you think about it, we, humanity, the children of Adam, Bani Adam, children of Adam and Eve, we are afflicted with this hunger for immortality and unfading power. So therefore, when we fast, when we think we reposition ourselves vis-a-vis political power, all these things, we are renegotiating the sin of having eaten from the tree and reposition ourselves again above Satan's temptations to Christ, to Adam and Eve. Yeah, we do live in an age of temptation. And I think it is, to me, this is something that we need to revisit the Quran to understand better, because the power of Satan in the Quran is not coercion, or, he doesn't come in the Quran with pitchforks and rods of fire. He actually comes with seduction, ighwa in Arabic. And when he challenges God, he says, I shall tempt them all to come to hell. لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. So the power of Satan is the power of temptation. And that's why there's that parallel and continuity between Christianity and Islam, that temptation is also a form of coercion. And the reason it is perhaps more dangerous than brutal subjugation of the body is that because instead of just subjugating the body where the spirit remains defiant, you are actually like enslaving the interiority. As the Irish critic Terry Eggleton says, that colonialism is in our age is not the occupation of external landscapes, but it is the occupation of our interior subjectivities, where that which we like, desire, find beautiful aligns to the interest of those in power. So temptation in that sense becomes something that we need to dissect also politically as well, because our subjectivities become very much involved in thinking that we are choosing something ourselves when it is actually against our well-being. And so therefore, we need this kind of like little dissection how temptation works and why it is a form of coercion. Because when people are tempted, like they're being tempted by another subjectivity that convinces them that this is good for you, so the person feels they are exercising their spiritual freedom or their moral freedom, or that they're choosing, they're free. And which is why we need to discuss also the notion of freedom that has been completely a paradigm shift between Western modernity and Eastern religions, whether it's Islam or Buddhism or Christianity, where freedom is defined through the notion or the concept of being free from desire. That Buddha's Four Noble Truths is actually the cessation of desire is the path towards freedom. The same thing in Islam is that we have been given the two paths, and then like we are asked to choose. And this is precisely what happens in the story of the Grand Inquisitor, because the Grand Inquisitor tells Jesus, "Go back, I hate you, don't ever come back." He says, "Because we made the deal with the devil. We have accepted bread. We give bread to people and take away their freedom." He said, "You placed upon them a burden of moral choice that they cannot endure. People want safety and pre-made choices, and they would give up away their freedom in order to choose bread." And this, of course, like I'm sitting and I'm reminded of the verse, in Surah Al-Ahzab, verse 72, "Inna aradna al-amanata ala as-samawati wal-ardi wal-jibali فأبين أن يحملنها وأشفقن منها وحملها الإنسان إنه كان ظلوما جهولا." That we have offered the trust or the responsibility, amana, the trust to heavens and earth and mountains. And they all refused to undertake it or to take this burden, for they had mercy for themselves. But humanity took it upon itself. Or for human beings are arrogant and ignorant. ظلوما جهولا, arrogant and ignorant. Yes, but so the burden has been placed on us, and so many times with temptation we want to give it away to external authority, and that's why it has these temptations with Christ and these foundations of Islam about Tawheed, the unity of God and worshiping nothing but God. It's a way to affirm that we have willingly chosen this freedom, and this freedom is not easy. It's not simple. It's something like to think about and to exercise, because we easily give it away. Like when we see the tree of immortality or power, or when we have fears, when we look at all mistakes, big or small, we've committed in our lives, when we go deep into it, we realize that we thought we could fill a gap or a void with something external to ourselves. And that's why the idea of the burden is connected to also the Khalifa notion, that God placed us as his deputies on earth, that we have the Spirit of God within, and nothing comes above that. So when we seek comfort or satisfaction or power externally, as Satan convinced Adam and Eve that there's something outside yourselves, even though God said that I blew my spirit into Adam and Eve, therefore prostrate in front of them. I mean, what bigger thing do you need than that, when the entire universe bowed down to this new creation? And yet Satan's power was to actually make them lose their connection to self and think there is something stronger, better, more powerful outside themselves, even though the angels bowed to the Spirit of God within, and they thought there is something external. So anytime we seek external satisfaction, anytime we go outward to fulfill ourselves, we are relinquishing our existential status in the universe and the incredible power that has been placed within ourselves.